Good morning. Welcome to the Editorial Edge, where we begin with a new set of topics in this new week. I am Bhuvan and I once again welcome you to StudyIQ English IAS. On the agenda today, we have 3 topics, one of which will find mention in a host of articles. In fact, you had a recent article versus article debate that happened on a newspaper regarding this particular topic. Okay, so we'll seek to understand what are the points being made forward. What are the challenges associated with it? Okay. The first topic that I have for you is National Policy on Official Statistics, NPOS. Okay. We'll seek to understand how is policy, formulated regarding statistics. What's the way, statistics are accumulated? Okay. How is data generated, accumulated? What is the ramification of such large amount of data that comes with a population of 140 crore people? Okay. And how can it be better, amalgamated or synergized with the global best standards? So that's going to be our agenda number 1. Good morning, Coder. Welcome. Okay. Second topic I have for you is something that the UN Biodiversity now wants us to inculcate and introduce and largely make a part of our daily conversation. That is to do with the word fungi. Okay. The UN Biodiversity says that, well, no more should you say flora and fauna, but include a more holistic term, which they have termed as fungi, to gain and in fact highlight the importance of fungi. Okay, so we'll seek to understand fungi and we'll quickly go through fungi once again. Why? Because UPSC does seem to ask a lot of questions related to fungi. Okay, and not surprisingly, because again it makes a major part of the whole kingdom, so it's important for us to go ahead and look at fungi. Third is the Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary in Chhattisgarh. We'll seek to understand why, what's the importance of the Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary, what's the relationship that it shares with Kanha National Park, as well as the Bhoramdev Temple in Chhattisgarh. Okay, so it'll be a mix of environment and art and culture, the last topic. Okay, your neighbor, good morning guys. All right, so let's get started. This is my Telegram and Instagram handles. You can go ahead and connect with me here. Log in, scan it. This is my Instagram handle, whereas this is the Telegram handle where you'll find the PDF of this lecture uploaded at around noon. All right. And my email ID is mentioned for all those of you who want to reach out to me in case of any doubts, any questions, any strategy related guidance that you might so require or desire. Well, I'm available. Okay. All right. Let's look at the questions from the last class though, because that's what we focus on doing here initially, is to look at topics and solve questions out of them. Dipanshi, good morning. Welcome guys. Okay. So the first question, AdBlue, also known as diesel exhaust fluid, can reduce air pollution from diesel engine, which is absolutely correct. In fact, AdBlue is used. It is majorly made out of urea, okay, and it finds usage in reducing the emissions that come out of diesel. So what are the emissions? We'll also seek to understand that in the next question. But in terms of the examination focus, make sure that you know the correlation between AdBlue and the diesel emissions. Okay, so in this case, the correct statements are both of the statements related to AdBlue being important and correct. Go ahead and make sure that you know about this, okay? It's a topic that you would be best served to know from the examination perspective. One cannot deny that terms like these do find a lot of resonance with the commission, which is why a student should go ahead and make himself or herself aware with these topics that are associated with certain products or with the intent of reducing their harmful effects vis-a-vis our environment, okay? Let's look at the second one. So which of the above are not emitted by diesel engines? Now let's understand straight away. Okay, it's important for us to go ahead and know about the diesel emissions. Okay, so let's quickly note them down one by one if in case you do feel like, or else I will be obviously sharing this on my Telegram channel. Ashlekha, good morning. So first you have nitrogen. Okay, it's the major part of diesel emissions. In fact, close to roughly around 75% by volume is what you are looking at. Okay. Thereafter, you're looking at oxygen. This is 75% close to. Okay. Thereafter, you have oxygen, carbon dioxide, all right, water, carbon monoxide. What else would be there? Obviously, you'll have nitrogen oxides, the harmful nitrogen, particulate matter, okay, and you're looking at hydrocarbons. So these are the primary emissions that come out of diesel for me. Okay. Now, you might go ahead and also include aldehyde in this. Okay, aldehyde is another component of diesel emissions. So in case of my question here, which of these are not emitted? Obviously, nitrogen is emitted, nitrogen oxides are emitted, hydrocarbon is emitted, particulate matter is emitted. Now, sulfuric acid becomes, a byproduct in the next phase, in the next stage, when say products that originate out of the primary emissions go ahead and interact with the other elements in the atmosphere. Okay, so in this case, well, what you're going to find is methane, that's B, and sulfuric acid are not emitted by diesel engines. Okay, let's look at the next question. So the BS stage emissions, who goes ahead and notifies them? The MOEFCC does, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Okay, and the nodal agency that is going to implement and be in charge of the BS stage emissions, the Central Pollution Control Board, that also reports to the MOEFCC, the same ministry. Okay, so in this case, your incorrect statements are, well, these two, A and C. Okay, the correct answer here being Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. That is the primary agency insofar as the Bharat stage emissions are concerned. Let's look at which of the above are not a part of the Parliament of India. Obviously, the last one, Solicitor General. Okay, bear in mind, the President and the Vice President are an intrinsic part of the Parliament. Okay, whereas the Attorney General does have the right of, say, representation or going ahead and speaking, taking part in the proceedings in both houses of the Parliament. All right. However, the Attorney General cannot vote. So in this case, the Solicitor General obviously is not a part of the Indian Parliament. Now the architects who went and said that designed particular cities, Calcutta is known as Charnock's city, in fact. Okay, so Job Charnock was the one who is responsible for Kolkata, then Calcutta. Delhi, obviously Latins. You must have heard of this term, Latins Delhi, to do with the central Delhi, the positions of power that exist in central Delhi. Okay, whereas Chandigarh is with Le Corbusier. Okay, so in this case, you are finding that the correctly matched is only B. All right. So the Constitution of India classifies the ministers into 4 ranks. Unfortunately, the Constitution of India speaks about ministers only at two instances. Article 74, when it talks about the Council of Ministers, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, it's Article 352 subclause 3, where you have the word cabinet being mentioned. Otherwise, the Constitution has not specified as to say what exactly are the different demarcations of ministers. That is a norm that is followed from the English setup, the British setup. Okay, so in this case, obviously, the term being the Constitution of India classifies is the incorrect one. We do follow this, but that is to do with, say, the traditions that we have inherited out of the British colonial system. Okay, the number of ministers shall not include 15% of the total members of Lok Sabha is absolutely correct. Okay, so your correct statements here being only B. Finally, which of the above is or are not critically endangered? Well, prima facie, have a look. This is not critically endangered, obviously. E being the answer, Indian myna. Well, you find it all around. Okay, it's not very difficult to spot an Indian myna. Okay, Maori people, haka. You must have seen this during, say, various sporting events. It's quite popular culture. It's quite well known. Okay, so the Maori people obviously are native to New Zealand. The ceremonial dance, also known as haka, whereas what you find that both men and women can go ahead and partake in haka. Okay, so the third statement being the incorrect one here, which means your correct statements are A and B. All right. So these are my individuals: Ulfat, Vidisha, Pooja, Shubham, Crystal, Tannu, Karuna, Laughter, your neighbor, Coda, Asha and Ayush. Firstly, thank you for your participation. Okay. If any of you have observed, say, any change in your current affairs knowledge that has, since we have started this whole initiative, go ahead and let me know, are you benefiting out of this initiative? Because what you'll understand is that the focus eventually is on understanding the topic rather than the article. To the rest of you who are still not going ahead and taking part in this, I can only request you, answer the questions that I have for you today. See if it aids your understanding insofar as that particular topic is concerned. Okay. All right. Let's move forward with my first topic for the day, that is to do with national policy on official statistics. Meanwhile, let me have a look at this. Jerin, good morning. Pranjul, no problems, Pranjul. I'm happy that you're here again. Good. Bulbul, good morning. Welcome. Okay. So the national policy on official statistics. Now, typically, what you find in India, that the policymakers will typically rely on, say, sample surveys of households. Okay. Why would they rely on, say, sample surveys? To basically go ahead and assess, like, how are they going to implement policies. The framing part has to be backed by data. So that data is gained through, say, different sorts of surveys. Correct? So, for example, we have heard of, say, the National Sample Survey, the NSS. Correct? How many of you are aware of the National Sample Survey? Now, why is it held? Essentially to what? Determine the household consumption expenditure. Correct? Or am I wrong here? To determine the household consumption expenditure. True? Good morning, Aman, Kalyan, good morning, welcome. Thank you for joining, guys. Correct? At the same time, what you're also looking is, say, gaining particular types of, say, stats that come out of it. Correct? Like, say, estimating persons with disabilities, the number of them. Okay? You're looking at going ahead and finding out the expenditures related to different sectors, be it domestic tourism or health or whatever. Right? The conditions of drinking water and hygiene and sanitation, all of those are gained. That data is gained through an extensive questionnaire that is prepared by as part of the National Sample Survey. Correct? So you're looking at, say, people with disabilities. Okay. You're looking at, say, consumption or, say, expense on different sectors. And looking at, say, patterns, figuring out patterns through data. That's the whole point of it. Right? Additionally, besides from the NSS, you also have, say, the National Family Health Survey, NFHS. Correct? Can someone tell me which ministry goes ahead and conducts the National Family Health Survey? Right? You also have the Periodic Labor Force Survey. Right? This is for health. This is for employment. So it's not that we do not have the mechanisms to go ahead and, say, engage in different sorts of data collection. For a country of what? 140 crore plus people. Right? The sample set of each survey, you would expect it to be huge. The learnings coming out of those sample sets to be, again, substantial. Right? So let's understand the national policy on official statistics with that background. So the MOSPI, the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, it goes ahead and it has released just a few weeks ago, in fact. What you find is that the revised draft on the National Policy on Official Statistics was released by them. Now, what is the whole point of this policy? To provide reliable, timely and credible data. Why exactly? To support decision making. So essentially, the policy that you frame has to be backed by data. Correct? That you need credible data to go ahead and eventually, say, serve the aspirations of 140 crore people. Okay? So it emphasizes, what does the official policy say? The big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the new tech, the emerging tech will be now amalgamated in the process of data collection, say data processing, and eventually the data interpretation, then finally leading to the policy formulation. Aman Devya, correct. Good guys. Akhilesh, good morning. Take it. So now, data in its all forms, be it from statistical surveys or whatever you are looking at, has to be seamlessly integrated into the fabric of governance and decision making. And you're looking at data from all types, right from, say, the panchayat level, okay, the panchayat level to, say, state level, and finally the national level. This is going to be the thrust of all the data that is collected and thereafter now used to go ahead and, say, eventually formulate policy. India does at this moment have a very decentralized way of, say, data collection. Okay, you have states that have their own organizations for data collection. Obviously, the center has its own bodies to go ahead and engage in data collection surveys. Okay, so what is needed now? That there needs to be uniformity. Okay, for 140 crore people, you are looking at uniformity. That is the eventual point of it. But before we understand what exactly is the criticism around the policy, let's quickly take a look at the history of data collection. Okay, and so the first instance when someone can, say, go ahead and record a method of data collection in this country comes from Arthashastra. Okay, Arthashastra in fact says that village level accountants would be there who would go ahead and, say, calculate the expenditure coming out of a particular village, the output coming out of a particular village. So that in its rudimentary form was the first form of, say a survey being conducted. eventually leading to a policy formulation by the king. Okay, so here you had, say, data collectors at village level. All right. Thereafter, in the N.A. Akbari, okay, another very important text, the N.A. Akbari also says that, well, firstly, you must be aware right now, if you have gone through the text previously, if you have gone through your NCRTs, you will know that the N.A. Akbari talks about, say, weights and measurements, that a uniformity of weights and measurements need to be there for all traders and for all individuals across the kingdom so as to maintain, say, fairness. Okay. At the same time, we are looking at N.A. Akbari also, who followed another version of what was put forward in the Arthashastra. So it's not that, say, something that we inherited from the colonial system. Okay. Yes, this was fine-tuned and probably, say, put forth, scaled in the colonial system. But India did have the roots of data collection right from the very start. Okay. Now let's understand from our colonial inheritance that we have. This article from which newspaper, sir? PS Creations. I will share the newspaper article. Okay. It's in fact a whole research paper that I have gone through for this. And I'll share that research paper on my Telegram handle, say around noon. Will that be okay? Okay. Okay. Let's understand the British inheritance that we have vis-a-vis data collection now. Once we have understood, say, these 2 points. Okay. And from the exam perspective, I would suggest make a note of this. Because again, you will not find it in any particular newspaper. That's more important. And so it's important for anyone who's gone through and looked at this. So first, 1862, you find that the Statistics Committee was set up, first time ever, to standardize forms used for collecting official stats. Thereafter, 1868, the Statistical Abstract of British India was published. Correct? So, obviously, beginning from, say, right from the very beginning, 1858, 1862, the turning point comes in 1925. You have M. Visvesvaraya, a very prominent name, one of the most famous engineers to come out of this land. Okay, someone who's responsible for a large part of Karnataka's topography, how Karnataka's, say, whole water security has been shaped, owes a lot to M. Visvesvaraya. So he is in fact part of a committee, and he is tasked to assess the gaps in these economic statistics of British India and to suggest remedies. Thereafter, M. Visvesvaraya says, let's set up a central statistical bureau. Okay. Eventually, what you find is that you have the CSS, the NSS that are set up, the Central Statistical Survey, thereafter the National Statistical Survey. They are all set up for different mandates. But the problem, data collection and management, as I told you, is highly decentralized. You are looking at union and the states who are involved in data collection. Now understand the problems here. Globally, okay, if you understand globally, you will see that most of the data that is put forth by United Nations or United Nations Development Program or all of these multilateral organizations, okay, their time period of the data sample collection. So the time period is normally the Gregorian calendar. So it will go from, say, 1st Jan to 31st December. Whereas in the Indian realm, what you find is that ours is financial year based. The first divergence when it comes to, say, Indian data being at par with the global data. How do you compare two different sets of data? You need them to be of the same sample size or similar sample size so as to maintain conformity of interpretation, plus the date or, say, the period in which the sample survey was conducted should be again near to each other. Now here you are looking at a 3-month divergence that originates straight up. So this is point number 1, the primary criticism of Indian data. Point number 2, that it is highly decentralized. Okay, let's look at it. There's lateral decentralization between ministries of GOI. The government of India, the union government, conducts different sample surveys, different ministries in charge of it. Thereafter, vertical decentralization, states doing their own surveys, union doing their own surveys. Do you understand the problems that originate out of this now? First, your time period is different. Secondly, no conformity of data collection. Okay. So, the apex agency at the center, CSO, in the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, the National Sample Survey Organization, NSSO, and the Central Survey Organization. Okay. So, now in the states, they have their own agencies again. Aman, one second. Does India somehow follow the ideas postulated in Arthashastra? Well, India, what I'll say is, Aman, to answer your question, what you find is that the inheritance of our, say, statistical bureaus and the methodologies that they have is largely to do with the British colonial system that originated out of it. And obviously the recommendations of an individual that you all must be aware of, P.C. Mahalanobis, right? So he had a major role in how, so far as, say, the Indian statistical data collection story is concerned. He is in fact considered to be the father of this whole process. Okay, so even though we can say that the rudimentary form existed in N.A. Akbari and Arthashastra, eventually what you find is that it is after post-independence in fact, when P.C. Mahalanobis came up with his model, mathematical models of collection, and which are followed till this day. Okay, does that answer your question, Aman? Let me know. Okay, all right. So the criticisms now. Number one, inter-agency divergence in data. Why? Because you have vertical plus, say, horizontal differentiation. Different agencies doing different work, no conformity of approach. Number two, data varies due to different time references, like I told you. The financial year versus annual year. Again, causing a problem. Number three, data classification. What you find is that governments post-independence, since independence in fact, at different governments at different times have used data in a manner that may not be considered fair. Okay. For example, you find that recently the hydrological data has not been released. Okay. You will find at times, say, that the employment data may be withheld. Now, this is why, because data is being considered as a currency. Whereas in a democracy, you look at data as an enabler for you to make better choices. Okay. So that mindset has to change. Eventually, data as a currency, you do not need artificial scarcity of data. Okay. That there needs to be a more holistic approach. Okay. Holistic, inclusive, and fair approach towards data. Okay. That data decentralization should not be mistaken for, say, data classification. All right. That is one problem that you are looking at. Similarly, the delay in sporadic nature of release of data. The timely release is important, because eventually, my students, please understand that the whole point of data in a democracy is for the democracy to formulate better policies. Okay, that is the whole point of it. That is why you are collecting surveys. That is why you are collecting data. So if you are not going to release the data for whatever XYZ reason, then the whole point of the survey is lost. Are you able to understand this? Okay. Similarly, you're looking at ethics in data collection. If you have gone through your, say, rural areas, you will find that, say, private agencies on a contract are often employed to go ahead and conduct the sample surveys. Okay. Now that often leaves the room open for misuse of the data so collected. Just a simple example. You go to the local mall, you enter your mobile phone number while entering the mall or wherever. Whichever place you are required to enter your mobile number, which is, even though it may not be required. A week after that, you start receiving spam calls and spam messages. Why does that happen? Because your data has been collected by private agencies, sold to a third-party operator, and now your data is considered as a valuable asset for that particular party, who will now harass you with calls for advertising or whatever, XYZ reasons. So if that can happen to you in a simple place as a mall or a theatre or wherever, imagine what could happen at the village level. You understand that? So the ramifications of the ethics in data collection need to be understood very clearly and appreciated. Okay. And finally, the last one, safeguarding the data so collected. You have the recent policies that have come up in, say, maintaining privacy of the data collection is there. In the past, we have discussed concepts such as data sovereignty, data integrity. How is data localization different from data residency? Okay. If these are completely new terms, well, don't worry. I have shared these PDFs on my Telegram channel. Okay, you can go ahead and have a look at them. Important concepts, because once again, from the exam perspective, not just say from the mains. From the mains, I would obviously recommend that a student makes himself or herself aware of these terms. But from the examination of pre-perspective, okay, several questions can be straight away formed out of them. The basic difference between, say, residency and localization. What's the ethics? What's the central tenet of data sovereignty? Okay. So that is the primary criticism insofar as data collection in India is concerned. Well, Afreen, well, that has to do with, again, the motive and the intent So I believe that particular thing is, that particular data proposal is being challenged in the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. All right. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and see what the Honorable Supreme Court says, really. Okay. All right. So let's look at the India as a global leader in stats. Now, of late, I have given you the whole lowdown of, say, the data problem in India. But one thing we need to be aware of, say, of late, India's G20 presidency has hogged the limelight, and rightly so. What you'll find is, come 2024, India will take over the presidency of one more particular huge organization, in fact. One it was the last member of in 2004. Okay. So the UN Statistical Commission. Okay. The UN Statistical Commission, India will be a member of this particular commission, this particular body of 24 nations. All right. 24 nations selected from across the globe based on equitable geographical distribution. India was one of the final countries to be elected, beat out China in a very close race. Okay, and India will assume the membership of the United Nations Statistical Commission come January the 1st, 2024. Okay, so obviously it is the right time for us to understand that this membership of such a huge body, where again, what's the whole point of India's membership there? That it is going to closely collaborate with potential stakeholders in understanding how its data and its interpretation can benefit the globe, and what it can learn from the best practices that are followed worldwide and introduce it into its own domestic architecture. Correct? So you are looking at an opportunity to collaborate with the statistical systems of other countries, and that it is a two-way benefit that will eventually accrue out of this whole process. India's membership of the United Nations Statistical Commission, again a very important fact that you ought to be aware of. Okay, all right. Let's look at the questions now, guys. Now that I've given you the lowdown of what stats in India, the problems with stats in India are, go ahead and look at this. Bulbul, I will provide you a mains question. Pranjul, I found 2-3 environment questions. Pranjul, I am happy that it is beneficial. Just to keep you updated, the RNA series will most likely be on this Saturday. Okay, we'll do an extended class on Saturday. Okay. All right, let's look at statement question 1. The National Statistical Commission, the NSC. Okay. Very important body when you consider, say, statistics in India. Again, a statutory body. So you ought to be aware of what the NSC does. So which was the committee that recommended the formation of the National Statistical Commission? Was it the Rangarajan Committee? Statement B. The chairperson of the National Statistical Commission enjoys a status similar to Cabinet Minister, true or false? The members, do they enjoy a status similar to Minister of State, true or false? And the chairperson may be removed by the Prime Minister after due following of procedure. Okay, you will let me know the correct statements in the comment box. What I do suggest is, for all my students, go ahead and answer this in a tabular format. Okay, I have questions A to G or F, and it should benefit you. All right, let's look at statement B. The UN Statistical Committee has more members than the permanent members of the UN Security Council. So if you're following my lecture closely, you would know how many members does the United Nations Statistical Committee have. And obviously, the permanent members is well known, P5. Okay. Statement B. The members of UNSC are elected on the basis of equitable geographical distribution. And C. India was last member of the United Nations Statistical Council in the year 2004. You will let me know the incorrect statements. Finally, question C for you, my dear friends. Arthashastra, village level accountants who would collect data on economic output. N.A. Akbari, data on farm produce and attempts to standardize the system of weights and measurements. Okay, if you're following my lecture closely again from the very beginning, the answer is but obvious to you. You will not forget it here on. Okay, so they identify the incorrect statements for me. All right, that concludes my first topic for you that I had today. Meanwhile, this closes on the 11th of September, the Prelims to Interview initiative, where we take an exhaustive look at each and every subject. Okay, right from prelims up until your interviews. If you have had the chance to anyways interact with any of our students who are a part of this ongoing process already, they will tell you that, they are benefiting out of this whole exercise. Because unlike, say, the other institutes or, say, the other platforms, the focus here is on understanding. Okay, the focus here is not on rote learning or just giving you notes. The focus is on making sure that you understand why things happen the way they happen and what are the questions that can originate out of that whole topic. Because eventually you get selected or you don't get selected based on your ability to solve questions plus your ability to have gone through the whole syllabus. Both are required in equal proportion. So that is the whole point of it. Go to studyiq.com or you will find the sign up link in the description box. Once you decide which language you want your whole lecture in, apply the code BALIVE, BALIVE. Why? Well, you get a huge discount. It's no more substantial, it's huge. Okay. And well, I get allotted to your batch. So we can go ahead and prepare together for your UPSC 2024 ambitions. Take care. Now let's come to the second topic. Meanwhile, let me look at the questions. Aman, can we expect India's influence on G20 wherein African Union might be added in the list? Aman, I would definitely expect that. More importantly, before G20, you might probably have the African Union given a more larger role, a more prominent role in BRICS. Okay, that is where I think it'll become a point of convergence, because let's realize India is aspiring to, or has to a large extent already become, the voice of the global South. And so what better platform than BRICS to go ahead and highlight it? Obviously, G20 will also be an area of focus for sure. I can assure you that. Okay, let's look at fungi nomenclature now. So the UN biodiversity, here is this tweet. Okay, now the tweet came earlier this year, but the topic has now gained relevance and we'll understand what fungi is. So what does the UN biodiversity say? Well, it wants us to go ahead and use the word funga. Why? To highlight the importance of fungi. Okay, so what it says is, whenever you have to say flora and fauna, don't say flora and fauna, say fungi instead. Okay, that it is a more mycologically inclusive term. All right, the Species Survival Commission of the IUCN, by the way. Okay, this commission that operates under the IUCN, which also releases the very famous red list, which again you and I both must be equally aware of. So the Species Survival Commission also has in the past said that it is important to use mycologically inclusive, say, terminology. Okay, so by adding fungi to the discussion about biodiversity, we acknowledge the importance of fungi and emphasize their role in the natural world. Very important to go ahead and say classify their role now, their benefits and their harmful effects. If we have gone ahead and understood these different sorts of information related to fungi, well, your job is done. Okay, so let's look at fungi now. What exactly is fungi? So it's a diverse group of eukaryotic microorganisms that belong to the own animal kingdom, biological kingdom, distinct from plants, animals and bacteria. So you look at the 6 kingdoms of life: Animalia, Plantae, Protista, Eubacteria and Archaebacteria, and you find that fungi is given a completely different classification. Why is that? Firstly, well, they have certain things that you need to be aware of. Number one, okay, number one is what they have is a cell wall. Now, which is composed of something that is prominently asked in the examination, chitin. Okay, so their cell wall is composed of chitin. Okay, what you find is that it is a polysaccharide. Okay, a polysaccharide that basically forms the exoshell or the exoskeleton of the fungi. Okay, they are at the same time, they are not autotrophs. Say the questions, if it goes ahead and asks you which of the following are autotrophs, which means they can go ahead and make their own food. So for example, the first option being plants, third option being algae, fourth option being fungi and bacteria. All right, so here you straight away know that plants and algae are autotrophs. Yes, they can go ahead and source their own food. Whereas you find that the fungi are heterotrophs. What they do is they use other microorganisms to go ahead and then source the food from them. So they do not exactly produce food. Okay, they are not capable of photosynthesis or any of those processes. Okay. Okay, Deepanshi will seek to understand that. We'll seek to understand as to how, say, fungi includes both the terms. That's coming later, just coming later after this. Okay, so they play a crucial role in the ecosystem as decomposers, saprophytes. Okay, all of this is the role that we are focusing on. What fungi does, eventually you are going to find that it has the ability to break complex microorganisms break them down into simple microorganisms so that it can go ahead and process them. The nutrient recycling that you talk about in the soil, fungi play a very important and a critical role in that process. Okay, so they secrete enzymes to break down complex organisms into simpler substances. The whole decomposing role that we are focusing on. Okay, so let's understand their benefits now. Number one, they can convert nutrients and make them accessible to plants. Essentially, this nutrient cycling that we often talk about. Okay, this nutrient cycling, this cyclic motion of nutrients that exists is primarily to do with the decomposing role, the ability of fungi to break complex organisms into simple substances and thereby go ahead and spread it across the particular variable. Yes, fungi play a very important role there. They help in soil carbon storage by participating in the carbon cycle too. Another important. Okay. So the processes, questions now, carbon cycle, carbon storage, carbon sequestration, you are looking at nutrient cycling. Which of the above processes is the fungi a part of? So you have to understand that each of these is essentially an MCQ that is staring at your face. So pay close attention. Okay. They're also used as food. Yeasts, for example, used in baking and brewing. Fungi also produce antibiotics like penicillin. You also look at cheese production that uses molds. Okay, and they have been used to help degrade various pollutants. They can go ahead and break down because of their ability to go ahead from complex to simple. You find that say plastics, okay, or other degradable materials. So in course of say our intervention, all of that is liable to be broken down into simpler forms by the fungi. Okay, plastic, petroleum-based products, all of them can be dealt with by the fungi. But at the same time, you're looking at harmful effects also, okay, causing diseases, most importantly, aspergillosis. If you have been following my last class where we discussed the kakapo parrot, okay, endemic to New Zealand, right, was critically endangered, now making a comeback, you will find that the primary reason of the decline of the kakapo parrot, besides obviously that it is a flightless bird, is to do with this particular disease, the aspergillosis, and that is a fungal infection. Okay. They again produce toxic compounds which can contaminate food. You are looking at certain sorts of mushrooms that can be say compromised. You go ahead and eat those wild mushrooms, you can have hallucinating effects, or it could lead to fatalities also. Okay. You're looking at crops and plants that can get damaged. For example, fungal blights, most important, most common there. Allergies, and thus, more importantly, understand this. Right now we understood that fungi can go ahead and break complex to simple. If this process is inefficient, what happens is that you have partially degraded substances that are now more polluting, more dangerous in their rather than in their primary form. So even though fungi can go ahead and do this, the process may not be 100% efficient. Okay, so textiles, leather, paper, which can be detrimental if these materials are not properly preserved or stored. If the process of breakdown is incomplete, the fungal action and the fungal process that is associated with it may be very, very harmful, not just for the atmosphere, but also for humans alike. All right. Okay, let's look at these questions, guys. Which of the above is chitin made up of? Chitin again finds a huge importance in your syllabus. Make sure that you know that it is the exoskeleton of fungi. Okay. Few things that you need to be aware of. So fungi obviously is the heterotroph, number one. All right. It takes part in nutrient cycling plus carbon storage, the processes. And number three, it can go ahead and reproduce both asexually as well as sexually. Okay. Asexually, you will find that the fungi has something called, I believe, pores, P-O-R-E-S. Okay. So it uses pores for asexual reproduction, whereas it is also capable of sexual reproduction. Okay. So which of the above is chitin made up of? Number one, nitrogen containing polysaccharide, lead containing polysaccharide, sulfur-containing polysaccharide, or none of the above? You will let me know in the comment box. Let's look at question number E. Fungi are autotrophic. Fungi contain cell wall. Fungi can reproduce sexually and asexually. Fungi can exist as single-celled organisms. And are they capable of photosynthesis? Okay, you will let me know. Since they are autotrophic or not should basically determine your answer for E. Okay, if you know A, well, the direct correlation is with E. So go ahead, attempt this question. Once again, to those who are watching me live and those who will watch me later, make sure that you attempt these questions. Why? Because eventually it will complete your understanding of that particular topic. Remember, it's not the article that the examination asks of you, it's the topic that you're supposed to know and the questions out of that topic. Okay, let's look at the next question. Species Survival Commission. Okay, which body is that responsible for the Species Survival Commission? Is it UN Biodiversity? Is it B, World Wildlife Fund for Nature? Is it C, IUCN? Or is it D, Fauna and Flora International? Let me know in the comment box. Alright, this is my Instagram handle, by the way, guys. If you have any doubts or if you'd like to connect with me, go ahead, do so. I'm available for you. Alright, so we come to the third topic I have for you. Meanwhile, if you understood the first topic around data collection, sample surveys, and the second topic around fungi, please do not hesitate to leave me a like. I'd really appreciate that. Okay. Alright, let's look at Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary. Now located in Chhattisgarh, this is in fact a major part. The Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary forms a tiger corridor. Okay. And it forms a tiger corridor with the Kanha National Park in neighboring Madhya Pradesh. Now recently you had the Chhattisgarh High Court, the Raipur High Court, I believe, go ahead and reject a proposal to finally designate Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary as a tiger reserve. That PIL was filed and it was dismissed. Okay. So let's look at why Bhoramdev is important. Firstly, it's a critical tiger habitat. It's a part of a tiger corridor with the Kanha National Park. And geographically, you find it is a very sensitive area. You have rivers that originate out of it. The biodiversity of Bhoramdev is rich. Because you have tigers. Students, understand this. If a forest has tiger in it, okay, straight away understand that this tells you that the health of the forest is top class. Okay, that's the direct correlation because, well, tigers can only exist where certain conditions are met. Because it's a territorial animal, it needs a large area, number one. Number two, it needs a large prey base, which means many more species that will exist in that forest. Because many such species are existing, which means you have different niches that have been formed, which means that there are adequate resources in that forest to sustain that whole ecosystem that is being formed, right? So straight away the correlation is, if a forest has tigers in it, it means that the forest's health is top class, okay? Which is what you find with Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary, all right? So sanctuary, part of the Maikal range of the Satpura Hills, forms a continuous tiger corridor with Kanha National Park, and it serves at the origin of the Fen and Sankari rivers. So straight away you realize how the ecosystem, the whole geographical region is rich, not just say in flora and fauna or fungi, but also in terms of the resources that the forests holds. Okay, so the sanctuary is inhabited by various wildlife species which you would expect since it has tigers. Okay, if there were no wildlife species, well, the tigers would not exist straight up. So you're looking at tigers, leopards, wild dogs, bears, sambar, barking deer, cheetal, gaur, and birds and reptiles. Now, nearby, just near the wildlife sanctuary, you have a very old temple. Okay, the temple goes by the name of the Bhoramdev temple. Now, ideally in India, you have say two prominent types of temple architectures that are followed. The Nagara style and the Dravida style. Correct? Or is there a third type, guys? Those who are watching me live, can you quickly let me know if there are two types or if there are three types of temple architecture in India? Very quickly let me know, please. Huh? Okay. It is spores. Dipanshi, spores. Yes, you're correct. So what you have to understand is, In terms of Nagara, it is commonly associated with temples in North India, whereas the name Dravida, as it suggests, it is to do with temples in South India. However, this is not a uniform demarcation that you find. What about the areas, say in Satpura, Maikal? What about the areas in central India? So there you have, say, a state like Madhya Pradesh. Okay. A state like Madhya Pradesh can have temples that may be a part of the Dravida architecture, may be a part of the Nagara style of architecture, or may be completely different from these two types. Okay. In this case, what you find is that it is known for its stunning architecture, intricate carvings. It gets its name, the whole wildlife sanctuary gets its name from this temple, and it has a profusion of carved images known as the Gurur type, unlike the North Indian Nagara style of architecture. So here is the third type of temple architecture now that you are being introduced to, called the Gurur type. Okay. Now in terms of, say, in terms of Madhya Pradesh, okay, for example, you have the Kandariya Mahadev temple in Madhya Pradesh. Okay, the Kandariya temple nearby Madhya Pradesh. Now the Kandariya temple is an example of a classic example of Nagara style architecture. The key features, some of the key features, if I had to quickly discuss, right? So it will be common for the entire temple to be built on a stone platform. There will be a common stone platform for it, right? The Garbhagriha or the sanctum sanctorium where the deity is placed, it will be always be located under the tallest tower. So you will have a common platform, there will be a huge tower, and the deity will be lodged here just below the tallest tower. Correct? Some of the more say commonly known features that they are, right? You will also have a shikara there, right? So some of the examples of Nagara style of temple architecture, if I was to quickly note it down for you, the Sun Temple in Konark, a prime example of Nagara style of temple architecture. Okay, you are looking at the Sun Temple in Modhera in Gujarat, another very classic example of Nagara style of temple architecture. And then finally you are looking at the Ocean Temple, okay, which is also in Gujarat, I believe. Okay, so the three examples: Sun Temple Konark, which is in Odisha, the Sun Temple in Modhera, and the Ocean Temple in Gujarat. Okay, the three topmost examples, if you can find, of the Nagara style of architecture in India. But what you find is that the Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary and the Bhoramdev Temple, they are to do with the third type, the Gurur type. Okay, so go ahead, have a look at the Bhoramdev Wildlife Sanctuary, have a look at the Gurur type of temple architecture. How is it different from Nagara and Dravida? Alright, let's look at the question that I have for you guys. Not a very difficult question since I have just given you the information. Okay, which of the above is not an example of Nagara style of temple architecture? Sun Temple Konark, Modhera, Ocean Temple. Okay, sorry, Ocean Temple is in Jodhpur, my bad. This is in Rajasthan. Okay, Ocean Temple in Jodhpur or Meenakshi Amman Temple in Madurai. Right, you will let me know which is not a part of the Nagara style of temple architecture. Right, my dear friends, that concludes this morning's editorial edge. 3 topics I had for you. If you understood all the 3, please do consider leaving me a like. If there is any particular comment that you have for me, I'd appreciate it if you left it for me in the comment box. Many of you leave comments for me, positive comments for me, and that really makes my day, gives me a lot of encouragement, it gives me a lot of positive energy. So keep up your positive vibes too. If there is any way I can improve for you, let me know that too. Alright, I'll be more than happy to factor in your suggestions. Okay? Alright guys, that concludes this editorial edge for this morning. Do consider joining me tomorrow morning, same time, 6:30 a.m. As in a span of say 30 to 40, 50 minutes, we take a look at multiple topics and more importantly, the questions that come out of those topics. Alright, thank you so much for your time. Till I see you tomorrow morning, 6:30. It's Apurv saying bye. Have a productive